Okay, in a war, there's usually a front. In this war, this 21st century war, the first of the 21st century as you're describing it, the front is a bit fractured. We see Cairo, we see Tunisia, we see Dublin, Athens. We also see Madison, Wisconsin. Am I wrong to group Madison, Wisconsin into this front line of this 21st century war?
Yes, I think so, because that was an individual issue having to do with workers in one aspect. Because when you look at all of these wars, and again, not being a Monday morning quarterback, having forecasts that this would happen, we made our forecast based on very basic principles. A lot of unemployed people, particularly the youth. So figure it out. You got a lot of young people with those hormones raging, and they're raging mad. Again, they're holding university degrees in worthlessness. They're living on, like in Egypt, at best $10 a day, 40% of the country in poverty, and the people knowing the deal. It's not like the old feudal days. In these neo-feudal days, they know the story. The people at the top are robbing everything. And again, when you talk about the IMF and you talk about Egypt, let's go back to 1990. That was the privatization scam. They took those valuable public resources and sold them to their friends. So what's happening in Ireland, what's happening in Spain, Portugal, Greece, in the Middle East, everyone knows the deal. The top of the pyramid has all the money, and when the money stops flowing down to the man on the street, the blood starts flowing in the streets. There's no stopping it, but boy, are they going to try.
All right, well, let's just turn to the U.S. for a second. In a recent Trends journal, you show a chart showing food stamp usage going back to 1975. For every single year since 2000, food stamp usage has increased, now hitting unprecedented levels. What does this say about the U.S. economy?
The United States is going into third world status in many ways by its behavior, by the way the people are living, the levels of poverty. As you well know, the gap between the rich and the poor is the widest of the United States and any of the industrialized nations. According to the latest OECD report, Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the United States ranks fourth to the bottom of income inequality among all those members. This used to be the most egalitarian nation on earth. So what you have is a nation that has been sold out. They sold out our industry. You don't want any of that dirty industry over there. You could become a clerk or a cashier. How about that? So that's what's really happened. And we're going to see more and more of a decline as incomes continue to decline. And look at the stock market. 90% of the stocks are owned by 10% of the population. So it's income inequality, a declining standard of living.
All right, now you mentioned wages and income there for a second. Apparently, something that came out of the recent Bilderberg group gathering in Switzerland was that the top elites around the world, to maintain their power, are looking for wage parity around the world so that the wages in the U.S. and China would be the same, which would mean, obviously, in the U.S., they've got to come down 70, 80, 90% from where they are now, which some would argue are pretty meager. Is this in the cards? Is this a possibility? Is this a trend that you see?
It's happening already. It is a trend. I grew up in the 60s. I remember they had this song, this Harry Chapin song, Cat in the Cradle. Oh, it was, but your daddy didn't show up for the baseball game or something. And oh, how terrible it was. Well, the baby boomers became the worst hypocrites in society. They became a caricature of everything that they hate. They're holding down two and three jobs just to stay even. They're working like crazy and around the clock. So they're letting the takeover happen. And they are part and parcel of it because of their consumption habits. So yes, it's already happening. The people are being drilled into their head that cheap is good. Go to Walmart, save a dime or a nickel, and you'll live better. You should get paid less because, after all, we can't tax the very rich. And that's the lie, by the way, that they use. What they say is that these plans to tax the rich, these tax plans, they call rich in the United States making $250,000 a year for a married couple, with kids. That's not rich. That's good, that's a nice living, but it ain't rich, particularly when the average apartment in New York City, a tiny little joint, goes for $1 million. So what I'm saying about taxing the rich, I'm talking about You know, you don't have to make $500 million a year, $200 million a year, billions of dollars a year, and not be taxed at that high rate. So that's that whole disparity, and that's how they keep drilling the people down into the ground by making them seem as though the people on the top deserve what they get. And because you're just a regular you, an average Joe or Jane, Joe's six-pack, get back to work, don't ask for a raise, and if you complain, you're not going to have a job.
All right, Gerald, you mentioned you grew up during the 1960s, and of course, during that period of time, very famously, we had the generation gap. And you had that young generation at that time, the baby boomers, then, as you're describing it, are hypocrites in that they are taking all of the resources and they're leaving those who were born after 1966 holding the bag. In fact, the recent proposal for reform of Social Security makes a cutoff point for those born after 1966 as terms of scaling back all of the Social Security benefits that the baby boomers are protecting. Is there a new generational war coming in America, like we saw in the 60s, a new generation gap and a new war of the generations?
I don't think so. I think because everybody's getting screwed. So it's, everybody's in the same pot. But even the bigger element of hypocrisy, as I see it, and again, only speaking for myself, as I see it with the baby boomers, is that all of these wars going on, and not a peep. And look at Obama, he's out-bushing Bush. Hey, I'm going to unilaterally start a war in Libya because our core interest and them of our allies is at stake. Not a peep. If Bush did this, they'd be screaming bloody murder. The slaughter's going on every day in Afghanistan. As we speak, earlier this week, a string of Predator drones flying into Pakistan, blowing up innocent people. Hey, how about a military strike in Yemen and a little drone strike? Where are the baby boomers? They got lockjaw. And you know why? Because there's no draft. The only reason they were out there and I was there was because our lives were on the line. We were becoming cannon fodder for Robert McNamara's sick war. But the baby boomers, nothing. And if the soccer mommy's boys were on the line, boy, would they be out there protesting.
All right, Gerald, one last question. You point out in the recent edition that we're basically at the end of normal, the global end of normal. So how do we prepare for the end of normal going forward, Gerald Celente?
Gerald Celente's GC's 3Gs, guns, gold, and a getaway plan. And I don't say that lightly. Anybody, again, I only speak for myself. I remember 9/11, as everyone does, but I was prepared for it because I'd been predicting it, that something would happen of magnitude. It was in USA Today on December 14, 2001. 2001 won't be our year, Trendseer says. So when 9/11 happened, I didn't know if Indian Point nuclear power plant would go. So whether or not it's Indian Point, 9/11, Fukushima, dirty bombs going off, be prepared. Prepare for the worst. As you mentioned, robbing copper out of churches. They'll rob the gold out of your teeth. You better be ready to fight. And that's, by the way, is going to be the headline of the Summer Trends Journal. Fight. Your life depends on it. The system is out of control. The losers don't have a clue. The Beltway incompetents are not going to fix the problems that they've created. There are three worlds out there. There's the political world, the media world, and the real world. The real world knows what's going on, a lot of them. Every day I get letters, emails. Where should I go? What should I do? The media world and the political world have you mesmerized. They have you snooky stupid and gaga to death. You better plan for survival. If you plan for the worst and nothing happens, what did you lose? Nothing. But if you plan for the worst and the worst happens and you've done nothing, you're toast. Fukushima, you name it, one after another. The economies are in crash course. Whatever they do in Europe to save the Greek tragedy, won't mean anything. A new one's just around the corner, bigger and better.
All right, Gerald Celente, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for being on The Edge.
Hey, Max, always great being on with you, and it's great being on the edge.
And that's going to do it for this edition of On the Edge with me, Max Keiser, and my guest, Gerald Celente. If you'd like to send me an email, please do so at ontheedge@presstv.com. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.